Hi everyone, this is Shelley and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back with another Question the Narrative video, and today's topic is the not-so-biblical roots of dispensationalism. For the last few months, I have been delving deeply into eschatology, and one of the forms of eschatology that comes up quite a bit in the comments is dispensational millennialism. This approach to eschatology at this point in time is the most popular approach taken by the evangelical church in contemporary times. And one thing that I have been trying to point out to people is that this is a new point of view when it comes to eschatology. It was created around the year 1830, which happens to also be around the same time that people started taking a very, very literal approach to the book of Revelation. And it was, in fact, made popular around the early 1900s by the creation of the Scofield Bible by Cyrus Scofield. Now, over the weekend, I watched a video called The Mystery of Israel Solved. And I was floored when it came to the portion about dispensationalism and the origin of it and who was actually behind it. I highly recommend that you do watch this video because the entire thing is fantastic. It's not all about dispensationalism, but that portion is in there, and there were so many things that I learned about it that my jaw dropped open at the mention of some of this information. And one of the things that I will tell you is that the Scofield Bible was actually commissioned by the Rothschilds. Yes, you heard that correctly. In addition, Scofield learned about dispensationalism from its creator, John Darby, who also worked for the Rothschild. He actually worked, I believe it was called, for the British Trading Company. And the Scofield Bible was published by the Oxford publication or Oxford publishers, and they were owned by the Rothschilds. And so then this Scofield Bible started being distributed across all of the Moody publishers and became the go-to form of eschatology taught at seminaries. So I just wanted to share with you a few very interesting articles that really tell you not only about the origin of the Scofield Bible, but who Cyrus Scofield was, that so many people are trusting him with their eschatology. This article that I'm going to be reading some passages from first is from the website fortheloveofhistruth.com, and I'm going to leave a link in the description box to this and to all of the other articles that I share with you today, because I will not be sharing the entire thing. It is very long, but it does tell you a lot about Cyrus Scofield. So I'm just going to start reading it now. I am going to talk about a certain man everybody knows. His name is Cyrus I. Scofield, the man who wrote the Scofield Bible, the Bible that Christian brethren read so frequently and with which they have made up their current doctrine, which has changed the thrust of America since the middle 1800s. This is going to be of controversial content, and because it is controversial in content, I will pick one of the Bible's most controversial characters to quote, the prophet Jeremiah. He preached, he warned, he exposed false preaching of his day, and all to no avail. And he and his Israel people went right into captivity, the very captivity about which he had been warning. He put that blame for that tragic collapse of his civilization right where it belonged, with the ministers who taught error. He wrote this, "Behold, the prophets say to them, Ye will not see the sword, neither see famine, but I will give you assured peace in this place. Then the Lord said unto me, Prophets prophesy lies in my name. I sent them not, neither have I commanded them, neither spake unto them. They prophesy unto you a false vision and divination, a thing of naught and deceit of their heart. Therefore saith the Lord concerning the prophets that prophesy in my name, and I sent them not, yet say, Sword and famine shall not be in this land. By sword and famine shall these prophets be consumed." So, in the spirit of calling out false teachers, the author of this article is zeroing in this particular article on Cyrus Scofield. And again, before this past weekend, I knew nothing about this. I was shocked. I am not going to zero in on a lot of men, but only one man, one of the most famous ministers of the turn of the century, C.I. Scofield. You will learn how he defrauded his mother-in-law out of her life savings, and how he was convicted of forgery. In another case, he was sent off to prison. You will learn tonight how he openly carried on with other women and abandoned his wife and family, never sent them a dime of support. When his wife finally divorced him, he married the woman with whom he was living. All the time he was writing the now infamous notes to the Scofield Reference Bible. As a Christian, he was a disgrace. As a man, he lacked ordinary chivalry of a gentleman. He called himself doctor, yet he never went to any college which could convey that degree. His life as a minister makes the recent escapades of some modern ministers pale into significance. His financial support for the Reference Bible came from Zionist, aka Rothschild, and conspiratorial groups out of Boston, Massachusetts, chiefly known as the Secret Six, that group tied to the Order of the Illuminati, and some other orders some of you may know about. Scofield was no Jeremiah. For certain he preached, but was not called. God did not send him, so you know who did send him. His false doctrines have spread across this land like a plague, like a smoke in the nostrils of our Lord, like a stench, and almost every Bible bookstore carries copies of Scofield's reference notes. The truth that I am talking about is one common thread throughout the remainder of the Bible. In the forefront of this scriptural error, you will find the teachings and Bible references of C.I. Scofield. And this talk is dedicated to the exposure of this man, the doctrines he preached and taught that have now taken over fundamentalist churches across the country. Since the advent of conspiratorial theologians such as C.I. Scofield and some lesser-known men before and after him, our brothers have never been weaned from the warm milk of the Word. They seem to be content to be coddled, as if the Word had only a personal thrust. And they have arrived. Oh, do they tell you they have arrived, taught a dozen different ways, and by as many different denominations, including the Catholics and the Mormons. The other 85% of the Bible is either ignored or not understood, and we are left with the darkness of a purely personal gospel. You can understand here now I am talking to you as a warrior, a man to defend our country. Why would I be interested in Scofield from just that point of view? Because to promote this conspiracy to take over the country, they must universalize the Bible and make it apply to all men. So along comes some false preachers like Scofield who begin to weave into it certain Jewish fables. Thousands of so-called fundamentalist ministers carry or study the reference notes of the Scofield Bible. Many Protestant Bible school students use this Bible as their reference. They use it as their source as to what the scriptures really mean, as opposed to what they really say. What these Christian people do not tell us is that their theological hero, Scofield, and I'm just going to interject here that they're probably not telling you because they do not know. They have no idea of the character of this man who they are trusting again with their theological views. Scofield deserted his first wife, Leontine Carey Scofield, and his two young daughters, Abigail and Helen. They ignore the fact that he never sent them any financial support even though he became very wealthy. They never got a dime. A woman in the 1880s did not have government welfare, and good-paying jobs were not usually available in those days. He treated his wife and children as though they did not exist. Now, since this article is fairly long, again, I'm just going to summarize some of the paragraphs that I just skipped over. He ran around with other women and finally got a divorce. And he married the woman that he was living with at the time, which was mentioned earlier. So I'm just going to read now. You know, every time you see a Scofield Bible, think about that lady. As a Christian, Mr. Scofield entered the legal and political career. After he was alleged to be saved, he stole thousands of dollars from his Christian and secular friends. One of his financial scams was quite serious, and he got convicted of forgery and spent 6 months in the St. Louis, Missouri jail. He defrauded his mother-in-law of $1,300 in gold and never paid her back, even though his finances were such that he could have done so. A little bit further down, it says Scofield never attended any college even for one day as a student. Scofield, however, fancied himself as a lawyer. He assumed all sorts of phony credentials, from that of a minister to that of a Bible scholar to that of a lawyer. Nothing seemed to hinder him, and of course he was not admitted to the bar as he could not pass the examination. However, through the influences of the secret 6 men in Kansas, Scofield was admitted to the bar. Though he had never attended any school and with no formal training whatever, he gave himself a theological doctorate degree in the same way. Scofield, loud cars in my neighborhood. Scofield went on with the help of the Secret 6 to be appointed United States Attorney for Kansas, only to be forced to resign after 6 months when he and his friend Ingalls were caught trying to blackmail the railroads out of some money. What is important here is that the Boston Secret 6 assigned Scofield the task of translating the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man concept into a system of Bible teaching. It was in those long days and nights when he was in prison for forgery that Scofield began studying the theological philosophy. This is not very nice. I'm just reading the article of a born loser named J.N. Darby. Again, not my words. Darby was a scatterbrained Englishman we would call a hippie today. He never washed, never cleaned himself up, but he became a great scholar. Darby was already doing in England what the Secret 6 had assigned Scofield to do in the United States. He brought the brotherhood of man and fatherhood of God into a new denomination. So I'm just going to add in here that this is another theme that is talked about in the video that I showed to you, and I will link the video in the description box as well, is that both Scofield and Darby had ties to Freemasonry, which is that they were actually Freemasons, not even just ties. They were Freemasons. And I'm assuming, I could be wrong, that this is what the Brotherhood of Man and Fatherhood of God and the Brethren movement may have been involved with. Not sure. That's just speculation on my part as I'm reading through this. So summarizing just a little bit more, Scofield was eventually admitted to the Lotus Club with no credentials, and he was kind of pushed in there by someone named Samuel Untermeyer. And it says the purpose of Samuel Untermeyer and those associated with him was to find a way to get fundamental Christians to have an interest in and support for the international Zionist cause, which had been one of Untermeyer's lifelong projects. Untermeyer died in 1941, but records I have in my office proves beyond a shadow of a doubt he was a dedicated communist at the time. They prove he worked for communist causes all of his adult life. In the 20 years of membership in the Lotus Club, Scofield had a long association with him and had to know about his un-American activities and his synagogue of Satan. Each of you need to always keep in mind the Brotherhood of God, the Brethren movement, and its kindred of thought theology of Scofield dispensationalism was and still is a class movement as thought of from the communist point of view, not a religious movement as you might think. Okay, and the last part that I'm going to share from this particular article is just this paragraph right here. As I have written time and time again over the past 20 years, the more churches we get in America, the more wicked and socialist the nation becomes. Scofield's new testimony has been the leading cause for the fall of the American civilization. It has altered the Christian and his theology to the point of indifference to what is happening in his country. He is not concerned about it, but generally approves of the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man ideas promoted by thousands of hours of television entertainment and programming. So now that I gave you a little bit of the background of Cyrus Scofield, let's move on to John Darby and see what we can find out about him. And this is from a website called fulfilledcommunicationsgroup.com. And it says, before examining Scofield's life, we need to understand John Nelson Darby, the principal figure from whom Scofield borrowed his biblical analysis. Darby was a Satanist, Freemason, and agent of the Rothschild-owned British East India Company. Darby's family owned Leap Castle, renowned as the most sinister and occultic castle in Ireland's history. Darby became a leader of a Christian sect called the Plymouth Brethren. He is generally credited with originating the secret rapture doctrine and made several trips to America to spread his vaccine of heresies. Darby used many terms in common with occult theosophists. Darby used many terms in common with occult theosophists. He referred to Jesus as the coming one, the term New Agers use for the Antichrist. Referred to God as the architect, same phrase employed by Freemasons, meaning God for the uninitiated, but Lucifer to true initiates, and many other occult phrases. Darby even penned his own satanic version of the Bible. The Illuminati always knew they could not perform a wholesale transformation of the Bible because it would be recognized and rejected. Therefore, the approach through the centuries has been to whittle it away, a word here, a phrase there, the universal strategy of boiling the frog. Darby slyly introduced satanic wording into the biblical text. For example, in the King James rendering of John 6, verse 6, Peter told Jesus, "And we believe and are sure that thou art that Christ, the Son of the living God." Darby rendered this, "And we have believed and known that thou art the Holy One of God," in the King James. Holy One of God is a title for Jesus used only by demons. In 1897, Theodor Herzl began hosting the Rothschild-backed Zionist congresses in Switzerland, developing the plan for a Zionist takeover of Palestine. On August 29, 1897, Herzl predicted that within 50 years there would be a Jewish state, and that would have been 1947. Coincidence? Knowing this scheme would require Christian approval, Herzl approached Pope Pius X in 1904, who very politely told him where he could stick his plan. After being rejected by the Catholics, the Rothschilds knew Protestant support would be essential, but this could only be achieved by tampering with the Bible to make it appear God himself had ordained the Jews to retake Palestine. Such a Bible needed to come from a non-Jew, someone with credentials as a theologian, and thus emerged Cyrus Scofield and his reference Bible. I'm just going to interject here again. I know that I am going over some extremely controversial stuff right now, but I am just sharing with you this information, and I think that it's important that people understand more so the character of the people, again, that they are trusting with their eschatological views, especially the person, Scofield himself, that they are trusting with their study Bible, with those notes that so many people trust as highly as they do the Bible, it seems. We need to be careful. We need to understand the ulterior motives that people have. Okay, I'm going to continue. Scofield started out as a crooked Kansas lawyer and politician. In 1881, the Atchison Globe reported C.I. Scofield, who was appointed United States District Attorney for Kansas in 1873, and who turned out worse than any other Kansas official, is now a Campbellite preacher in Missouri. His wife and 2 children live in Atchison. He contributes nothing to their support except good advice. That same year, Topeka Daily Capital published this: Cyrus I. Scofield, formerly of Kansas, late lawyer, politician, and shyster generally, has come to the surface again, and promises once more to gather around himself that halo of notoriety that has made him so prominent in the past. The last personal knowledge that Kansans have had of this peer among scalawags was when, about 4 years ago, after a series of forgeries and confidence games, he left the state and a destitute family and took refuge in Canada. For a time he kept under cover, nothing being heard of him until within the past 2 years, when he turned up in St. Louis, where he had a wealthy widowed sister living who has generally come to the front and squared up Cyrus's little follies and foibles by paying good round sums of money. Within the past year, however, Cyrus committed a series of St. Louis forgeries that could not be settled so easily, and the erratic young gentleman was compelled to linger in the St. Louis jail for a period of 6 months. So that was just a little more background information on both Darby and Cyrus Scofield. And, I think this is why it's so important that, yes, although, we certainly can go out there and we can read commentaries and we can read expositions and we can get study Bibles and we can get concordances. What we need to remember is that the men who are writing these things are human and are fallible, and it should not ever be held to the level of Scripture. So looking into the life of Scofield, I think, is very important, specifically because it is the most popular eschatological view at this point in time. And it has been since around the early 1900s, kind of got a resurgence in like the 60s and 70s. And now here we are. And this has led to a lot of the interpretations that people have nowadays. And I mentioned earlier, even on the very, very literal translation of the book of Revelation has its origins in this, in dispensational premillennialism. So I just really want to point that out, that it's do your homework, okay? And know who it is that you're trusting. And this goes for all of us. Always remember that man is fallible, but our Father in heaven is not. That's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one either here or over on Instagram. And if you like my work and would like to check out my YouTube membership, I will leave a link in the description box for that, or you can just click on it right on my channel page. And I hope you have a great day.